Hey, what's up? Welcome back to your channel name. This time, we're going to dive into a story that will make you think twice before walking alone at night. Grab some snacks, turn off the lights, and listen closely. That day, the skies above Manchester were as grey as ever, with low-hanging clouds and a thin veil of mist wrapping the historic blocks downtown. Among the Victorian buildings, a three-story structure stood quietly, housing the headquarters of a well-known legal consulting firm. From the outside, the building appeared modern and stately, but there was a strange stiffness in the air, an unseen weight that clung to its walls. Emily Sanderson, a 31-year-old professional, had just completed her training and was reassigned to the main office. She wasn't the kind to believe in the supernatural. With a legal background and solid experience in human resources, her mind worked in terms of logic and order. When she stepped into the office for the first time, everything looked routine: clean carpeted floors, white walls adorned with framed corporate slogans, and the soft hum of printers in the distance. But on the third floor, where her desk was assigned, the atmosphere changed. There was an inexplicable chill hanging in the air. Her workstation was tucked into a corner near a large colonial-style window, its curtains half drawn. The temperature at that spot was noticeably colder than anywhere else in the building. When she touched the wooden desk, a strange shiver crawled up her arm, as though something unseen had brushed against her skin. She dismissed it, chalking it up to the nerves of starting fresh in a new place. The desk came fully equipped: a computer, a stack of folders, a desk phone. Everything seemed new. But in the bottom drawer, there were deep, erratic scratches along the wood interior, like claw marks etched by a long nail or something sharp. She shut the drawer quickly and pushed the thought aside. Her first day passed with endless forms, meetings, and small talk. What Emily didn't realize was that her seat, her desk, had a history, one that should have remained undisturbed. By the second day, Emily began to learn the names and faces of her colleagues. Most were focused and cordial, heads down in spreadsheets or presentations. But one man stood out: Victor Holden. Middle-aged, quietly poised, with thinning gray hair and an expression that never changed. He looked like part of the building itself, unmoving, permanent, and strangely hollow. Victor had worked there for decades, since the firm's earliest days. He seemed to know everything: the quirks of the air vents, the strange hum near the elevators, even which office chairs creaked and when. When Emily introduced herself, he only gave a silent nod. But later that week, when she worked late one evening on the third floor, she returned from the break room to find a small handwritten note left on her desk. It warned her not to stay in the office past sunset, especially not while sitting near the old window. At first, she thought it was a joke. But the look Victor gave her the next day wasn't amused. His eyes held something she couldn't quite place: weariness, maybe even guilt. He never elaborated, never brought it up again. Yet Emily noticed that Victor never walked near her corner once the sun dipped below the rooftops. His avoidance wasn't casual, it was intentional, and his silence more terrifying than any explanation. The following days unfolded with subtle unease. Minor anomalies began appearing in Emily's routine. Her keyboard would glow faintly even when unplugged. Printed reports she had just filed away would be found stacked differently the next morning. One day, she arrived early to find her computer screen lit up with a blank document, one she hadn't opened. In the center of the page, one word was typed: sit. That was when she began to feel the wrongness seep through. Each evening she stayed late, the air around her cubicle thickened with a cold that no heater could fix. Occasionally, the old floorboards beneath her desk would creak. Not once or twice, but rhythmically, like steps pacing. She tried to be rational. Maybe the HVAC was malfunctioning, or the janitor had walked by. But the disturbances escalated. One night, she heard the sound of typing from a nearby desk, long after everyone had left. When she approached it, the sound stopped. The screen remained dark, like it had never been turned on. Her instincts told her something was wrong, but her mind resisted, unwilling to entertain the idea that something beyond her understanding might be at play. Still, each time she sat down at that desk, her heartbeat rose without reason. One afternoon during lunch, someone casually mentioned that the desk Emily now used had once belonged to a woman named Irene. The moment the name was spoken, a heavy silence fell over the table. The others exchanged glances, then quickly changed the subject. But Emily had already caught the shift in mood. It wasn't just discomfort, it was fear. From the fragments she pieced together, Irene had been a long-serving employee. Her work ethic was praised, but her end was cloaked in mystery. Years ago, she vanished without warning. No resignation, no personal effects collected, just an absence that became permanent. Some believed she suffered a mental breakdown, others claimed she had fought with the management before disappearing one stormy evening. What was certain, she was last seen sitting at that very desk. The next morning, she was gone. The desk had remained untouched for a long time after. No one wanted to sit there. Not until Emily arrived. And suddenly, all the strange sensations. The cold, the unease, the flickering screens, began to make a sinister kind of sense. Emily, unable to shake the growing sense of dread, decided to ask Ms. Gracie Holloway, the firm's operations director. Gracie was a sharply dressed, composed woman known for her leadership and calm demeanor. But when Emily brought up Irene's name, something changed. Gracie's smile tightened. Her posture stiffened. And then, in a clipped tone, she told Emily not to concern herself with the past. That became the pattern. Every mention of Irene met with closed expressions and curt replies. Ms. Holloway even suggested Emily consider switching desks, though she offered no real reason. Her eyes, however, betrayed something: fear, regret, or perhaps both. She avoided walking past Emily's corner in the evenings, always keeping to the well-lit side of the floor. The more people tried to bury Irene's story, the more desperate Emily became to uncover it. Who was this woman? And what really happened that night? All she knew was this: Irene had never truly left. Not completely. And the desk she now sat at wasn't just a piece of office furniture. It was a silent witness to something dark, and possibly, something still lingering. The weekend was supposed to give Emily some distance from her unease, but the chill from the office lingered in her bones. Monday morning brought a heavy fog and a darker air than usual inside the third floor. She arrived earlier than anyone, hoping to reclaim her routine and banish the absurd fears from her thoughts. But fate had other plans. When she dropped her pen and knelt to pick it up near the wall behind her desk, she noticed a faint draft escaping from the small air vent just above the baseboard. Something metallic glinted inside. Curiosity overtook her caution. Using a letter opener, she unscrewed the dusty cover and reached in. Her fingers brushed against cold plastic. It was an ID badge, faded, dirty, and cracked, but the name remained legible: Irene Whitmore. Her photograph had worn away, leaving only the vague outline of a woman with dark hair and tired eyes. The company logo was the older version, last used years ago. But what struck Emily hardest was the red smudge on the bottom right corner. It looked like dried blood. Her breath caught in her throat. This badge had no business being in that vent, no business being hidden. The desk had stopped being a workspace. It was now a gateway to something buried, something no one wanted her to find. And somehow, the air around her felt aware of what she'd just uncovered. At exactly 6:27 p.m., the lights began to flicker. Every evening. Not once or twice, but in a steady rhythm, like a pulse echoing through the ceiling. The rest of the floor remained unaffected, but Emily's corner bathed in intermittent darkness and buzzing static. Maintenance found no issues. They replaced the bulbs, rewired the sockets, and even checked the building's main power lines. Still, it persisted. That same hour, her desktop background would reset. The photograph of her dog, normally cheerful and bright, turned black. Not corrupted. Just black, like the screen had been deliberately overwritten. Then came the printer. Though she never used it after hours, pages would appear in the output tray. Blank at first, then slowly carrying faint outlines, a chair, a window, a figure. Shadow-like sketches, blurred as though drawn in haste or panic. Emily collected them all, unsure whether to burn or frame them. She kept them locked in her drawer, but each morning, they were back on her desk, arranged neatly, waiting. She began marking the time. And the more she paid attention, the more she noticed other patterns. The cold spot near her chair. The faint sound of humming, off-key and melancholic, coming from the air duct. Something was building toward her. Something had noticed she was paying attention. Victor Holden left without a word. On a Thursday morning, his desk stood empty, his computer powered off, and his nameplate gone. There were no goodbyes, no emails. Just absence. The HR department labeled it as early retirement, but Emily saw the fear in the receptionist's eyes when she asked about him. A colleague mentioned that Victor had seemed more agitated in the final days. He'd stopped speaking entirely and avoided the third floor altogether. Security logs showed he'd entered the building the previous night, but he had never left. No one saw him leave. The cameras, for reasons unexplained, recorded static between the hours of 6 and 8 p.m. Emily walked past his now vacant cubicle and felt a strange vibration under her feet. As if the building itself was reacting to his absence. That day, her corner became colder than ever before. When she sat, her chair creaked once, then again, on its own, after she had stood up. The walls groaned in strange places, and the office air grew thick with something she couldn't describe. Victor had known something. And whatever it was, it had silenced him. That Friday, Emily stayed late again, driven by a need to uncover the truth and to prove to herself that it was all in her head. The office emptied around her, one person at a time, until only the hum of machines remained. As the clock turned 6:27 p.m., the lights flickered as expected. She braced herself, but something new happened. Footsteps. Not from the hallway, not from the stairs, but from the carpet just behind her cubicle wall. Slow, deliberate, circling. She froze. The footsteps didn't echo like normal shoes, they were too soft, too smooth, like someone walking barefoot on padded floors. Around and around they went, pausing at times, as if listening for her breath. She stood up, heart pounding, and peered over the cubicle wall. No one. But the footsteps didn't stop. They were beneath her now. She dropped to her knees, listening. The sounds were impossibly close, inside the floor, like something crawling under the carpet. As if it were tracing the boundaries of her presence, waiting for her to look away. She fled that night, not even shutting down her computer. The next evening, something changed. Emily had planned not to stay late, but unresolved tension compelled her to return. She needed closure, or evidence. She set up her phone to record the room while she went to make coffee. When she came back, her phone had fallen, screen cracked. But what she saw in the video sent a shiver through her soul. For only 3 seconds, during a flicker of light, a figure stood behind her desk, tall, pale, with long black hair covering her face. She didn't move. Just stood there, leaning unnaturally forward, like waiting for someone to notice. Emily deleted the video. Not out of fear of being disbelieved, but out of something deeper, an ancient instinct to distance herself from what she had seen. The next day, as she walked past the hallway mirror near the elevators, her reflection lagged behind by half a second. In that frozen delay, she saw something standing beside her, a second shape, barely outlined in gray. Watching. Smiling. It wasn't just a haunting anymore. Irene had returned. And she wasn't alone. Emily's obsession deepened as fear turned into fixation. She no longer cared about sleep or food, only answers. Deep inside the archives room, she spent hours pulling out boxes, rifling through decades-old employee records. Her hands trembled from dust and cold, but she finally found it, a personnel file marked Irene Whitmore. The file was water-damaged and nearly falling apart. Pages were torn, some rewritten in shaky handwriting. Irene's photo had been removed, her name scratched out with what looked like fingernail marks. Notes in the margin mentioned disciplinary reviews, complaints from co-workers about unsettling behavior, and a record of psychiatric leave. At the end of the file was a sticky note with one phrase scribbled in red ink: "She never left." Emily clutched the folder as a light above her buzzed and died. A whisper trailed in the silence, not in words, but a vibration through the air like breath against the back of her neck. The archive's door creaked open behind her, though she remembered locking it. She didn't turn around. Desperation led her to an engineer's storage room on the ground floor. Amid rolled-up blueprints and construction plans, she found a layout of the original building from the early 1990s. What stood out wasn't the office spaces, but a sublevel, marked basement, level 2, sealed after 2001. There was no elevator access. No public stairway. But there was a narrow crawlspace outlined behind the walls near her floor. Emily realized then, the draft from Irene's desk wasn't from an air vent, it was from below. Every sound. Every footstep. Every hum. It had always come from under her. She photocopied the blueprint and traced the hidden path. She didn't know what she'd find, only that her sanity depended on seeing it for herself. But she waited for nightfall. Not because it was safer, but because something in her told her the darkness was when Irene would be awake. With tools borrowed from janitorial staff, Emily returned to her desk just after midnight. She removed the vent cover fully, revealing a crawlspace lined with rusted pipes and mold-stained insulation. Dragging herself inside, she followed the narrow passage, first horizontal, then down a steep slope she hadn't anticipated. The air thickened, filled with dampness and an almost metallic scent, like old blood soaked into concrete. After what felt like 20 minutes crawling, her hand struck an iron hatch. She forced it open, and emerged into a hallway that hadn't seen light in decades. The tiles were cracked, smeared with soot and something darker. Abandoned chairs lined the sides, all facing a thick steel door at the end, where peeling paint revealed a single word scratched beneath: "Return." Her flashlight flickered, but she pressed forward, compelled by something stronger than fear. At the base of the door lay a cracked nameplate: Irene Whitmore, Internal Audits. Emily wasn't alone anymore. She could feel it. Not behind her, but inside her. The door groaned open slowly. Inside was a single room, untouched by time. A desk sat perfectly aligned with the doorway. Papers scattered across it in a spiral pattern. In the center sat a broken mirror, its shards arranged like flower petals. On the wall, scratched in what looked unmistakably like dried blood, were the final words Irene had ever left behind. "I watched them forget me. Now I remember them all." There were photographs pinned around the room. Faces of former employees, some Emily recognized, others long gone. All had their eyes scratched out. In the middle, surrounded by threads and pins, was a photo of Emily herself, pinned in the same bloodied ink, circled over and over again. Suddenly, the lights in the hallway shut off. A deep, wet sound echoed from the crawlspace. Emily turned to flee, but the doorway behind her had disappeared. The room had shifted. She wasn't in an office anymore. She was in Irene's mind. By the time security searched for her, Emily had vanished. Her badge never left the building. Her computer, left untouched for hours, now glowed with a new background, a black screen with a single, ghostly image, a woman with hair draped over her face, sitting calmly at a desk. The office moved on. Weeks passed, and a new hire was assigned to the empty cubicle on the third floor. HR said nothing about Emily's absence, labeling it voluntary resignation. The company had always been discreet about disappearances. But every night at 6:27 p.m., the lights in that corner flickered. And if anyone stayed late enough, they'd hear the unmistakable sound of a chair creaking, twice, before the printer spat out a blank page. Sometimes, that page wasn't entirely blank. Sometimes, there'd be a faint outline of a woman with long black hair, seated quietly, waiting. And if you looked into the hallway mirror as you left, you might catch a delayed reflection of yourself. And just behind you, Irene. That was our story for tonight. Do you think it's just an ordinary tale, or is there something more to it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next stories. See you, if you still dare to watch next time.